Have you ever felt like you know more than others? Maybe you have hidden abilities. Today, I'll tell you which birth dates are more likely to have extrasensory abilities. Write in the comments how often you've had premonitions or intuitions that later came true. In fact, there are three types of extrasensory perception. The first is physical, where a person senses things with their body. The second is astral, which is when a person sees things, so to speak. And the third is mental, when a person senses or foresees things. Each of these levels has certain characteristics that are more sensitive and stronger in extrasensory perception. In fact, everyone has extrasensory abilities, but there are certain characteristics that make some people just a bit more predisposed to them than others. Today, you will find out which level of extrasensory perception you have. And it's possible that you have two levels. So let's start with the mental level. The mental level includes the numbers 8, 9, and 22, the months of August and September, and years that add up to 22. Of course, this also includes years that add up to 8 or 9. Let's start with the mental level. The mental level of extrasensory perception includes the numbers 8, 9, and 22. This refers to birth dates like the 8th, 17th, 26th, and so on, those that add up to these numbers. August, September, years that add up to 8, 9, and also years that add up to 22. What does this mean? It means that you have foresight at a very high level. The strongest position here is, of course, the 8. Why? Because it is the most prominent. And I also call the 8 people those who possess the knowledge of the universe. 9s obviously are sages, they are guides, and they have their own, yes, extrasensory abilities. We will talk about that in some other videos. And the mental one is the 8. The strongest representative of the extrasensory level are people with the number 8. The 8th, 17th, and 26th days, August. And if your year adds up to 8, though the year is a slightly different level, but August and 8's in your birth date, that's truly very strong extrasensory ability, especially if it also coincides with the 11th or 29th day. For example, August 11th or say November 17th, right? All of that falls into this category. Or for instance, March 8th. That's also a particular level of extrasensory ability. Everything related to the number 8 refers to people who possess a very strong mental level of extrasensory perception. What does this mean? First of all, this is pure magic in its truest form. These are people who can sense situations in advance, provided, of course, that they develop these abilities within themselves. What does it mean to develop them? It doesn't mean you have to go to some school of magic or anything like that. You already have this within you. If you're interested, sure, you can go study. But I would start by focusing on working on yourself. First of all, what is important for unlocking your abilities? It's important that a person does what truly interests them. If you have a block when it comes to interest, for example, if you go to a job you don't like, then there's no way you can talk about magic. Why is that? Because you'll only be able to access a tiny, tiny part of it. Let's start with the most important thing, with freeing yourself from your own blocks. The best way is, for example, to learn about your date of birth, to figure everything out. That's what we do in our school. There are systems that really work well, and you can start with those aspects. First and foremost, it's about removing the blocks you have. The second point is to understand, do I even need this, right? Because in reality, magic is life. As someone who holds the highest initiations in magical schools, I've been through all of this, and I can say, and I can confirm from my own experience, that when you let all of it go, you move to a completely different level. Yes, I had a school, and what truly worked in magic, I really enjoyed. Everything I set my mind to worked out, whether it was putting someone in their place or lifting someone up. But there comes a time when you move on. I would recommend that you start right away with the moving on. That is transition into a new magical state. This is the time that works now. These are people who, simply accept that they have these abilities. That will be the very best. Develop your intuition. If you want, if you think it's important, keep a journal, for example, of your intuition or of events that have come true for you or ones you sensed beforehand. In fact, everything is very well organized for you there, and the emotion that arises from a certain feeling stays with you for a very long time. And it's very important to pay attention to these states. Remember what you felt in certain situations when things worked out for you, and especially when they didn't work out, because that's your experience. Next time, you can simply recall the negative experience, the negative state, the feeling, and just avoid those moments. In any case, you have very strong abilities. Yes, write in the comments if you have an astral level of extrasensory perception, what you feel, what you sense or foresee, and how often the events you anticipated actually came true. The astral level of extrasensory perception corresponds to the numbers 2, 20, February, 29, 11, the year 82, for example. Those numbers that reduce to 2. 2 and 11 are different in terms of their state, of course. They are completely different. People with 2s see things in images. They often have prophetic dreams. For example, with 8s, they often fight dragons or all sorts of monsters in their dreams. Whereas with 2s, it's more about angels, more about people who experience calm visions, channeling often happens, or things like automatic writing, right? That is when you write and it feels as if someone is talking to you. This is your unique ability. This is simply, well, your level. So you can start with this, writing and relaxing so that your channel opens up and gets cleansed. And in this way, your entire energy channel, your intricate energetic structure will be thoroughly worked through. It's very good if some levels are doubled. Well, for example, August 20th or say February 8th or February 17th. Here we will have mental and astral extrasensory perception. They complement each other, especially these two levels. And then it's 2 in 1. Then everything becomes stronger. On the 29th or the 11th, it's a different level. Here, people may hear voices. They have a different level of information perception. By the way, the levels of information perception are my own development. It's a truly unique system that allows you to understand a person very quickly, and it is taught only in our school. These particular individuals, as it were, are able to receive information in advance, and they possess the remarkable ability to communicate, for example, with the very souls of others or with other people on the profound level of the inner ear. That is to say, the inner sound, a truly unique and deeply intuitive form of perception. By the way, people with 9s, especially those born on the 9th or 27th, you also have very strong telepathic abilities. So pay attention to that as well. Therefore, for people with 2s, it's about seeing in images, while those with 29 and 11 can hear situations, hear hints. So learn to listen to the space around you. This is your strength. This is your level of extrasensory perception. And now I want to invite you to my numerology webinar, where I will explain how the numbers in your date of birth work and how numbers function in our modern, already changed world. What period are you currently in, and what main combinations are being activated for you right now? And of course, I will also talk about how to become a numerologist, a profession that is really just beginning its journey. There are very few good, knowledgeable specialists, and you can help people not only by doing important, meaningful, and interesting work, but also by earning a good income from it. Be sure to register for the webinar. The registration link is in the description of this video, so make sure to join. And then there's the level of physical extrasensory perception. There are two very strong numbers here. Of course, you could say that there's also the 10th number, which is called the magician. Yes, the arcana for those who practice tarot. Yes, people with zeros, especially the 10th and 20th numbers, do have this ability. Why is that? Because 0 amplifies any characteristic. But here, I would especially highlight the 4th and 6th numbers. Why is that? Because people with 6s, firstly, were healers in their past lives. They already possess this skill. If we consider the physical level, these people tend to interact more with, well, the lower world. They are particularly good at communicating with the souls of the deceased, so to speak. All sorts of practices, like regressions, going into past lives, yes, that all falls under this as well. Why is that? Because this is an ability. This is about 4s and 6s, people born in April, June, on the 4th, and also the 22nd, even though that's a different energy. But the 22nd is very often relevant here. Why is that? because these are people who, first and foremost, work with the body and the body responds to them. That's why there are so many therapists here who, for example, guide people into past lives or work in kinesiology, kinesthetics, using the body specifically to receive and transmit information further. What is the ability here and what are the important points? First and foremost, it's important to learn how to detach from the lower world. Why is this important right now? We have already moved into a completely different format of existence or a new way of life for our planet, and connection with the lower worlds often holds a person back. So your task is that, for example, you are good specialists and guides to the lower worlds, and that's all well and good. But there's another very important point. It's important for you to learn to let go, right? To clear all of that away, to operate more on the mental level, rather than on the physical level. By the way, I was actually taught by a person who was born on the 13th, and one of the main focuses there was precisely the lower worlds. That's why I left that structure when the time came. Even though it was really very interesting, I still moved on to another level, to my own level, to the mental level. So regarding the physical level, it's important for you to learn how to go there without using the physical field. That way, you'll be able to work with your practices calmly without picking up anything from the lower worlds. In fact, anyone can master any extrasensory technique or practice. Yes, there are people who are more predisposed to this, but if you don't feel drawn to it, it's better not to go there. Why? Because some people are good at cooking, some are good at sewing, some are good at singing, and some really do have specific abilities, and that's their path. To play around with it, sure, to practice a bit, sure. But if you want to take it as a profession and a way of life, then of course it's better if you truly like it, if you genuinely enjoy it, if you feel it in your soul, and if you have the abilities for it. But if you want to study your own energy, your energetics, your abilities, your talents, not just your own, but also those of the people close to you, your children, your loved ones, then of course, come join the course. Of course, come join the training. The registration link is in the description of this video. Everyone is welcome. Welcome. Be sure to register for the webinar and attend it. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. Be sure to write how much what I talked about matches your own experience. Share this video with others. Subscribe to all our resources and to this channel as well. All the links are in the description of this video. And with that, I say goodbye until we meet again.